Hello, I'm Wes, the Explosion, and this is the Backlog. Behind me are all of the physical games that I need to play through, so that gives us a nice little visual for this. So anyway, the first game this week is gonna be a tough one, so let's just get into it. Okay, what if we had a sci-fi first-person shooter for the DS with a bunch of platforming sections in it? And 4 areas that you had to get through twice each, with 2 bosses that you had to fight 4 times each. And at the end of every level, you had to get back to your ship within a very specific time limit. And the enemies respawned every time you turned around. And sometimes we just throw in a bunch of enemies, and most of the enemies' gimmicks are just firing on you constantly from every angle in very erratic movement patterns. I don't know, I'm almost sold on it, but could we have it so that the main control scheme relies very heavily on a hardware gimmick? Yeah, I think we can make that work. Oh man, if we do this right, no one will ever bug us for a Metroid Prime game again. Damn it! So, as you may have guessed, I played through Metroid Prime Hunters for the DS. Before this, I was always of the common opinion that Metroid Other M was the worst Metroid game, but I was wrong. I was wrong by a whole hell of a lot. This game made me consider self-harm, and when I questioned why I was thinking about harming myself, I realized it was because playing this game was a form of self-harm. So hey, why cut frickin' corners? But I did get through this. I did get through this horrible and awful game. Let's go over the finer points again. As I said before, it's a first-person shooter for the DS. Now, first person works pretty well for shooters, but what it doesn't work well for is frickin' platforming, because you kinda need to see where you're gonna land. In real life, it works because you have a vague sense of, your positioning and where everything's at. But it's incredibly tricky to do platforming right, especially 3D platforming, especially first person 3D platforming. But hey, they went ahead and did a lot of sections of this in the damn game. At best, what it would do would be to drop you off a platform, and then you just have to make your way back to the beginning of the room and lose your progress. At medium, it would do the same thing, but you would get some damage, and at worst, you would fall off into the endless abyss of space somehow, despite, that's not how gravity works, and you'd die, and you'd have to start the whole damn section over again from wherever your last checkpoint was. This was awful. Then there's the amount of levels they have. There's 4 main levels with one final level that's pretty much just a boss area. And each of the main levels you have to get through twice. Now, this isn't a terribly long game, and each playthrough through a level only takes like an hour at most, so that isn't all that bad. What is awful is that you have to fight the same 2 bosses every damn time, except for the finale. They spared us and made a new boss for that. And maybe this wouldn't be so bad if the bosses were at all frickin' interesting. The first one you fight is pretty much just an erection that rises out of the floor and has a bunch of odd-looking bumps out of it that you have to shoot, and that they constantly shoot either energy balls or lasers at you. The second boss is an eyeball attached to the wall with tentacles. You shoot the tentacles, and then the eyeball moves around the stage very erratically, and you have to kind of try and predict its movements, which isn't easy, and shoot it a bunch before it goes back in its cocoon. And like I said, these bosses, they aren't great, they're not fun to fight, and they're just really boring too. The first boss I got to, I thought, oh, well, this isn't bad for an intro boss. I mean, it's not really exciting, but I'm sure they'll pick it up. The second boss, I thought, hey, it's a bit of an improvement. Still not terribly great, but if they continue to track upward like this, I'm sure we'll get some really good ones. and then they just repeated those two 6 more times. Even the final boss is just kind of a generic space monster thing. It doesn't have a lot of details to it, and I will forget that one almost immediately. The other two, though, since I had to fight them so many damn times, will continue to haunt my fucking dreams. And in Metroid games, normally it's pretty typical for them to have you have an escape sequence sometime in the end, where you have a time limit and you need to get back to your ship before the planet blows up. In this one, after every time when you leave the boss area, your ship tells you that the area's security systems are in place and that they'll wipe you out if you do not get back within a certain period of time. So, wow, rather than just one tense chase sequence, instead, every single time, it's just run back to your ship and hope you don't get too interrupted by all the frickin' enemies that take way too long to frickin' beat that will lock the doors on you until you can hunt them down and kill them to death. And that's the other thing. The enemies are annoying to fight. There's some mid-level ones that they're your rival hunters that will pop up and try and steal your keys, which we'll get to in a little bit. And there's these other things, I guess they're supposed to be part of the security system on this planet, where these guys, they run around like crazy, jump, they're hard to focus on because of your damn control scheme, and they just continually pelt you. And they just take up a lot of time, and they're really annoying. And if you get mixed up because the map is tiny and you go out the wrong door because the things are not easy to navigate, the rooms I mean, and you take 5 steps out and then you realize you went the wrong way and walk back in, the enemies will frickin' respawn. And then you have to do it all over again to unlock the damn door. Even the smaller enemies can be annoying because there's portals that will just continually spawn them until you take the portal out, so you just have to concentrate fire on that one spot. Meanwhile, trying to avoid all of the energy balls that they're trying to pelt you with. And sometimes they put so many damn enemies on screen, it's like you're the scrawniest, smallest, easiest target in an entire school-wide frickin' dodgeball game. And it is miserable. And it's not fun. And you want to know how you control all this crap? With the frickin' touchscreen. One hand, you have a death grip on your joystick and your shoulder button, because that's what you use to move around and fire, whereas with the other hand, you are using to control your pointer and a few other things on the frickin' screen, like the morph ball button and changing weapons. And it's unpleasant. Your hands cramp very fast. And you know what? I held it so awkwardly and so tightly that it actually rubbed some paint off of my frickin' 3DS controlling this fucking thing. Though yeah, Nintendo's pretty infamous for forcing hardware gimmicks into their frickin' games that kinda just ruin the entire damn experience, and it certainly did here. Oh, wait, I haven't even told you what the frickin' story of the whole game is. You see, there's a signal that says that the ultimate power and the ultimate weapon is being kept somewhere in this cluster of space stations and planets. And to get it, you need to find 8 keys. So Samus and every other bounty hunter in the frickin' area decides that they're gonna try and gather up all these keys and claim this weapon either for themselves or for a huge frickin' payday. Now, that means every time you go into a level, you find 3 keys, fight a boss, and then you're able to get the big key, which they can be stolen if you're defeated by a fellow hunter, which never happened to me. I always died by some other random bullshit, and none of these other frickin' losers. And when I got all 8 keys, I didn't even know what the damn point was, because it unlocked the final area, which as soon as it popped up, all the other hunters decided they were gonna just yoink it and get there before me. What was the point of even trying to steal the damn keys from me if you were gonna just go ahead and preemptively get there before me as soon as I opened it up while I made my way back to my frickin' ship? This is frickin' stupid. A few other points against it that I feel I need to make note of. The morph ball, it controls like shit. It's like you're greased up and you cannot keep still. If you're trying to wait in one spot for it, well, good luck, you'll probably roll around regardless. And then there's the time sections, and I'm talking beyond just the escape from the planet ones, where you'll activate a thing, it'll show you what it activates and where you want to go, and then if you fail, you have to start the whole thing over again, and it'll show you where you need to go to again, which is only a few seconds long, but if you screw it up enough time, that starts building up. All of these things together make this easily the worst Metroid game, and I'm sure anybody will frickin' agree with me. Okay, what the hell? I refuse to believe that this was done by actual people. I would have given it a 30 at worst and a 40 at best, and this is double this. How could this have happened? Okay, with a bit of research, I think I've determined where the disconnect is. And it is, funnily enough, some of the things that I disliked about this game actually being a strength to some other people. Now, let me explain. I think what happened here was Nintendo wanted to make a multiplayer shooter, and some of the elements that work in those games do not work in single-player adventure stories, right? When I went to Wikipedia, a lot of the things that I was complaining about came up in the reviews for those, but they still, end of the day, gave it like mid-80 scores, right? Where you look at some of the areas, right? And there's a lot of places to hide. You can get very, very familiar with it, and you can, you can launch some ambushes, you can hide behind some things, yada yada yada. But in a single player map, it gets very confusing, especially when you're only going to be going through the place a few times, and very hard to navigate. So that's a point against it. Then the control scheme. I mean, it kinda works. Like, you don't want lock-on like you do for the main Metroid Prime games. For a competitive shooter, that would be kind of broken. So, touchscreen, it gives you a lot of control over where you're firing and everything. Especially because the 3DS doesn't have extra D-pads or anything like that, so you'd need some way to aim. But if you play for any more than just a few rounds here and there, suddenly your hand gets cramped up, it's unpleasant, and it's just not a good time, And then because Nintendo's Nintendo, they probably felt that they needed a single-player thing, right? But because that wasn't the main focus of the game, at least not as I interpret it, like, why would you go and make a ton of original bosses and a bunch of crazy levels and all that stuff? No, we're only going to make 2 and recycle them again and again and again. And since we can't have Samus having all the upgrades over all the other characters that you can play in multiplayer, aka the other hunters, we can't give her like a ton of extra stuff she can use that, would be exclusive to her. So no upgrades other than a few different types of guns, which were kind of unnecessary throughout the story, at least to the degree they did it. So if they did this sort of thing again, maybe on the Switch, I could see it working better, because with that they could use either gyro controls or motion sensor, or maybe even give the option to use the second joystick on the controller to control your gun instead. It would probably be pretty fun. For the original DS though, this really sucks. I mean, I definitely wouldn't recommend the single player, and as for the multiplayer, I didn't get a chance to play it, but this is a fairly old game for a defunct system. I don't think I'm gonna find extra copies of this lying around so that I can play with other people. So, I wouldn't recommend playing this. If you're interested, watch a walkthrough. I actually used one to help me get through this, and it only took the guy like 5 hours, so that's doable. And now for another, mostly pleasant game, Vitamin Connection. This one is exclusive to the Switch. In it, you play as Vitaboy and Minagirl as they travel along in a little vitamin there, you can see. And you can rotate, and you can shoot, and there's like a few other functions too, but that's the gist of it. And you travel around a body taking out viruses, trying to get to whatever part of the body is actually troubled. Like if you see the map brought up, pretty much the body's like a maze that you map out as you go along, trying to get to the target areas. When you get to the target areas, you do, like, I don't know if you want to call it a minigame or not, but like a different style of game for the most part. Where, like, one of them's Pong, another one's kind of like reverse operation, where you are the sides and you try not to hit the middle. And then there's some other ones where you try and navigate a thing while you're rotating like you are here, but you're in a weird shape. And probably a few other things I'm forgetting. Oh, there was like a rhythm game, that's another one. Now, I believe the game was designed to be played two-player, where one player has some functionality and the other player has, you know, a different one. Like, I think the one steers and the other one rotates. But I didn't have anybody around, so I played this single, which it wasn't too bad. It did mean that I had more functions that I needed to keep track of, but, you know, it was still not horrible. And yeah, I enjoyed this game very much. It was fun, it had a cute little soundtrack, it had, you know, like, a very basic and cutesy story. A little ridiculous at times, but you know what? It's fun. And the character designs are fun, and it's just a lovely little time. There was one thing, though, that did almost make me rage quit, and it's a type of functionality you get in the second level of the game, where you have a claw that you can bring out, and you can use it to grab onto stuff. Now, I was playing with the Pro Controller, and the way you control this thing is you press the D-pad to bring it out, and then you use the right joystick to grip things, and you use motion control to frickin' steer it. So, yeah, motion control is not great on the frickin' Pro Controller. For Splatoon, I can make it work. For Super Mario Galaxy, it's a bit much if I'm being honest. And this wasn't great. It was also incredibly frustrating that to control it, I used two directional inputs, the D-pad and the frickin' joystick. But for whatever damn reason, rather than using either of those very sensible things to steer it, I used the frickin' controls. The motion controls. This is just, I don't know, it seems nonsensical. And what made it even worse, I'd say, was the fact that the final boss, I needed to use that stupid-ass claw. And yeah, it made it a lot more difficult than it needed to be. Also, forgive me for this part, this is the first time I did this game, and for whatever dumb reason, I did not figure out until the second time I played it that I was supposed to be watching both sides, which, again, if I were playing this two-player, I would only need to watch one side, and the other person would take care of the other one. After you beat the game, hard mode unlocks, which is just harder levels, and you can only play with one person, which, that's what I was doing anyway, so no biggie there, right? So, I'll probably get back to it and play it again at some point, but I didn't feel like going through the whole thing again. At least not back to back. The entire game probably took me about 3 hours to beat, at least the regular mode. So, it's not a huge time investment, but I think it does have a lot of replayability, especially because I would personally love to replay it with two people and see how that works. So, yeah. I'd probably recommend it, especially if you have somebody who would be interested in playing this sort of thing with you. So here's one I thought was going to take another week, Pokemon Blue. When I last talked about it, I was right about to face Sabrina, and then I did. And here's the fun thing in this game. While you have a limited number of usage on your moves, the enemy does not, so when I fought her frickin' Alakazam, it just spammed recover over and over and over and over again, so that I couldn't get enough damage on it to take it out. I did somehow squeak out a win, but that kinda left a bad taste in my mouth, so I put this down for, I'd say, about a week. When I came and picked it back up, though, I just kinda slammed through the rest of it. I got the rest of the badges, no problem, and beat Team Rocket the rest of the times I needed, and then I headed to Victory Road and the Indigo Plateau. And that's probably where I should be at right now. Let me show you why. Alright, this here is my team. In case you can't tell, this is not the sort of team I should have been able to take through and beat the Elite Four and Champion. The Elite Four, their Pokemon range from level 50 at the lowest to level 65, which is your rival's frickin' Venusaur, or whatever he chose in your case. Now, I did have in my favor a lot of revives and full restores that I had purchased, so I was able to bring my Pokemon back a few times. But still, with this team, I didn't think I was going to be able to do it. What I thought was going to happen for this would be that I'd continually throw myself at the Elite Four, slowly grinding up levels until I was able to beat them. And then I'd probably need to wait a little bit longer until I was able to see my brother again so I could evolve the Graveler and Kadabra so that I could have, fully evolved Pokemon to have a fair shot at it. But once I got past Lorelei, my team was actually pretty well set up to take out Bruno and, Agatha. So after restarting the battle once against Lance, who cheats by the way, apparently even though you're supposed to cool down after Hyper Beam, when Lance does it, if he takes out your Pokemon, that means he can attack first turn you have your next guy out. So yeah. Lost to him once, restarted the battle with like a quick save and quick reset, and then I was able to take out him and my stinking rival. So, joy, I finished it. After that, the only thing I had left to do was to capture Mewtwo, which, when I found him, he was a higher level than my Pokemon and did the thing where he would just spam recover if I got any sort of damage on him. So I gave up trying to get by without the Master Ball, exited the cave, retrieved that item from my PC, and then just caught him right away the next time I encountered him. Yeah, that brings up something that I don't think I was fully cognizant of until I went back and decided to play this from the beginning, and that was, despite every game following the same basic formula of you meet an old person, he gives you a pet monster and asks you to do his research for him. You go around, beat all the gym leaders and a criminal organization just by happenstance, and then become the greatest trainer in all the land. They still did make a lot of quality of life improvements throughout the years. The two biggest ones came next generation with the running shoes and Pokemon breeding. Without breeding, to get all the Pokemon, you would need somebody with, each of the starters, right? So 3 people. And before you could evolve your Pokemon, you'd need to trade it to each other, so that way you still got the data on them, which is a colossal pain in the ass. And then, running shoes just make it a lot easier to transverse things. Then there's other things like the day-night cycle, being able to run diagonally, better item storage, which I completely forgot was a thing, getting rid of HMs, and just a ton of other features that make the other games a lot easier to play. Not necessarily in a difficulty way. The games vary in how hard they are through the actual story, but through just a general, this is easy to play. It's not frustrating to play. It's just a lot smoother of a process. I guess what I'm saying is, objectively, these are the worst Pokemon games. But that said, I didn't exactly hate playing through these games. It was a nice trip down memory lane, and it made me really appreciate the games that came after it. All that said, this is a hard one to recommend because, while it isn't a bad game, and you can get a lot of enjoyment out of it, especially if you also played these right when they came out originally and have some nostalgia for them, when all the games do follow a very similar pattern, I find it very hard to recommend what is the worst out of all of them just from, a technology standpoint, what they were able to do back in the day. These are very rough around the edges, whereas the new ones, a lot more smoothed off. but I think I'm repeating myself at this point. I would say it's not a bad idea to go back and play these games if you're like doing like a gaming historian thing, I guess, and you want to see where it all started. Or if you just want a game that's a lot more digestible, because I know some people they complain that there's too many Pokemon in the new one. That said, if you do go back and play these games, just use psychic types. They're super broken. There are so many balance problems in this game, and my gosh, just use psychic types. Even the things that are supposed to kill them, Ghost, they're part poison, so they take double damage from psychic anyway. It doesn't matter. Oh boy. Thanks for sitting through all that, because I know the Metroid part was a lot. You might wonder, why did I play through the whole thing? And it pretty much comes down to sunk cost fallacy. It wasn't all that bad at first. Might have actually been a little fun. I don't know. It's such a traumatic experience, it's hard to remember. But as I got further and further along, it became more and more miserable. When I got about halfway, I was really not having fun. But I'd already played through half the game, so surely I could get through the second half. And then I got to the fifth one, and I'm really not having a good time. But I got through 5 other missions, of course I can get through another 3. And then 6, and then 7, and then 8. And then, at that point, I wasn't gonna let it beat me. So I got through it. So, that's why that happened. Oh, lordy loo. So where does that leave us? We started the week at 141, and I cleared 3 games. But when I was gathering up all of the physical copies that I needed to play through so I could just situate them all in one place for easy reference, I found one game that I missed on the list, so that adds us 1. But that still makes us a net positive of 2, so we're down to 139. Congratulations, I'm back where I started, I think a week or 2 ago. But progress is progress, so I'll take it. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this sort of thing, maybe hit subscribe and maybe we'll be back again next week.